Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our special meeting of May 11th, 2020. This will be a short meeting, and we will be going into closed session shortly. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford?
Here.
Oh, good. Okay. Mrs. Burton?
Here.
Mr. Centers?
Here.
Mrs. Frank?
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Here.
Mrs. Bonifield is present. President Johnson?
Here, we do have a quorum at our virtual meeting. Item 2 is our audience communication. At this point, I understand that we do not have any audience communication for this evening. So we will move on to item 3, recess to closed session to consider written legal opinion from counsel. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
President Johnson,
I had Mrs. Jarvis.
go ahead.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District recess to closed session to consider written legal opinion from counsel.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Burton. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion to recess to closed session to consider written legal opinion from counsel. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs.
Bonifield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. So we will now be, we will be leaving this session and going into a closed session, but we will be back on camera once we are out of the closed session. So at this point, Mrs. Okos, we just hang up from this meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, you will leave this call. You can either X out of this window, or at the bottom of the screen, there's a red phone. You can click on that, and then please move to the link that Mr. Francis sent you this afternoon for our closed session.
Thank you. And for those who are watching, we will be back later.
Good. Okay, test, test. Okay, audio's running. Go ahead and flip screen and Mark, you're on in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our virtual committee of the whole meeting for May 11th, 2020. For those of you who are watching and would like to follow along, you can go to our website, livoniapublicschools.org, and you can highlight over the board tab, and you will see board meeting information, and then down on the left, you'll be able to see the board agendas, and you should be able to follow along there. If you're tuning in to watch discussion on the items, this is the meeting that you do want to follow, because this is where we have more in-depth discussion, more questions, and we get into the nitty-gritty of all of the items that are being presented to the board. So this hopes to be a very informative meeting tonight, and we'll start with our audience communication. And Mrs. Jenkins, I understand there were no audience communications.
That is correct. We did not receive any audience communications.
Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. That'll take us to item 2, our committee of the whole. And we have two items. Item A is our LPS Task Force, and I'll turn that over to Superintendent Oquist.
Thank you so much, President Johnson. Good evening, everyone. We're pleased that we could be together with you and with our community this evening. We do have a number of items to cover. As you know, our last meeting, we shared with you a detailed update on the continuity of learning plan that we've put in place to keep our engagement and our instruction with our students going through the remainder of this school year, as well as providing social emotional support and food and nutrition support to our families. We also updated you on technology supports, both device and internet support to families, and had an opportunity for you to hear from a number of our cabinet colleagues regarding the implementation of our plan. So while we are still hard at work in implementing the continuity of learning plan, as you can imagine, we already have one eye on the future as well, and are beginning to think about what will the coming school year mean for our children, for our staff, for our school community. While we do not have all of the answers we would like at this point, we do know that we need to begin planning for a wide variety of eventualities. Certainly, some of those decisions will be directed by the state, either through the governor or the Michigan Department of Education. We will also be guided by the CDC and our Wayne County Health Department. And so as we do that, one of the things that we are doing at a county level with our ISD is we have created a Wayne County Superintendents Task Force. That task force has been involved with preparing information in a wide variety of scenarios with regard to preparing for our students in next year. Toward that end, I'd like to recommend to the board that we create an LPS task force to do very similar work, but unique to our district. We know this is on the hearts and minds of our parents, of our staff, of our students, and certainly of the leadership within our district, all of you and our team as well. And so what I'm bringing to you this evening is a recommendation that our administration create an LPS task force. The purpose would be to form the task force to thoughtfully plan for a safe and effective return to school in fall 2020, following our extended school closure. We're desirous of having many voices contribute to this important work. My recommendation would be is that we have a steering committee for the task force made up of about 15 to 20 individuals that would be working on the core plan and preparations for next year, and also lead 5 subgroups that will help guide our planning as we think about transitioning to year 2020-21. I'd like to suggest that on this, on either the steering committee or on each of the individual subgroups, that we have, again, a wide range of voices and stakeholders represented. So we would want to have certainly the voice of our Board of Education and our cabinet team. We'd certainly want to have feedback and input from our parent community. We would want to certainly have our staff well represented, from secretaries to teachers to building supervisors to maintenance and transportation. We want to continue to partner with our union leadership for each of our 6 employee groups. And so what we are developing is the structure for a task force, in which, again, we would have a steering committee of 15 to 20, and then from there, members of the steering committee would lead 5 subgroups. And they very much mirror the work that we are doing also at a county level. So I'd like to share with you what those 5 subgroups would be. They would be focused on academics, which would really look at things like curriculum, instruction, assessment, learning expectations for our students, grading and report cards, career and technical education, the schedule of the school day and how we would deliver instruction, virtual learning, and then, of course, the school calendar. So that academics group, their work would be bigger than a bread box. So we would have a number of things to cover in that area. The second area would be business, human resources, and support services. And some of those areas would be taking a look at any collective bargaining agreement implications that we may have to consider. Cost containment, or doing cooperative ventures with other districts as a cost savings measure as we move forward. Projecting enrollment and taking a look at how to mitigate any potential enrollment loss. Continuing to focus on meal distribution. Then, of course, looking at staffing, the hiring process and evaluation process as we move into next year, instructional technology, and then building, use, and community education. The third area of interest, I would think, to many of our students and many of our parents will be extracurricular and after-school activities. So we would be talking about things like athletics and marching band and assemblies and concerts and plays, before and after school childcare, which in our district we refer to as SAC, other extracurricular activities and clubs, PTA activities, parent-teacher conferences, open house, school tours. So just thinking through all of those different pieces as we look to begin the year with many of the special traditions we have in place. The fourth one would be focused on health, safety, and general operations. So this group would really be focused on things like the cleaning protocols, facilities and environment, social distancing protocols and guidelines that were given by the CDC or the state as we move forward. The arrival and dismissal of students, how students will travel within and around the school. Communications and public relations, we've taken that very seriously, the importance of communicating with our families, with our staff, and our staff with our students and families as well. And then finally, special education. As you know, we have been very focused on and are very proud of the efforts that our student services team has made to provide for our students with special needs during this remote learning environment. As we transition, if we transition back in the fall to the return to school, we need to think about many things with regard to the IEP of students, having meetings to ensure whether or not they need updated evaluations, looking at compensatory education, extended school year, and all of those types of pieces that are related to meeting the needs of our students with IEPs and with special needs. So within those 5 subgroups, and again, mirroring some of the work that we're doing at the county level, we're really looking at 3 different possibilities. One would be fully open, meaning schools will be reopened in the fall, and we would have a new normal, right? I think we all anticipate that if we are able to open school, as we would hope, that within that, there certainly may be guidelines with regard to safety practices and cleaning protocols and social distancing and so on. So again, as we look through those subgroup areas, we'd be looking at if we were fully open, again, our new normal, if we were partially open, meaning if we were limited in the number of students that we could have in a classroom at any one given time, or if we needed to look at any alternating days or alternating hours schedule that may involve a combination of in-person and virtual instruction. And then a third possibility, which would be if for some reason the state was not able to lift and move out of this stay home, stay safe, and we were given the directive that we could not reopen, what would virtual learning or remote learning look like if school buildings had to remain closed, or if they had to close at any period of time during the next school year to prepare for that. And so as we take and look at each of these areas, we would be looking through the lens of either fully open, partially open, or continuing in a virtual or remote learning environment. So while we do not have all the answers to that as of yet, and we'll continue to look closely and communicate with our state leaders and federal guidance on this, we want to be prepared in any case for all of those eventualities, and also certainly for the students before us. In addition to the proposed representation of the community members that we shared with you for the task force, we will also consult and advise our municipal and community partners, such as the City of Livonia, the Chamber of Commerce, or other community partners. We thought perhaps, since we know they're all pretty busy with their own contingency planning, rather than having them sit on the task force, that what we would do is partner with them, call them in as needed with folks who have expertise or are working on some of those same pieces within, for instance, the City of Livonia. We may call them in to share ideas with them, share resources. So that would really be more on an as needed basis rather than regular involvement. And then finally, in the event that, and certainly in such a large district, we have almost 2,000 staff and we represent over 14,000 students and all of their parents, that would be a pretty large task force and pretty unwieldy sized subgroups. And so one of the things that our team spoke about is also having an opportunity a little later this spring or early summer to have some community and staff virtual focus groups. And so to have groups similar, you remember that we did that during the district enrollment in building youth, right? A board member and a cabinet member met with a group of say 15 to 20 individuals. They asked some common questions in order to really hear the voices of our parents and of our community members and of our staff to get their feedback and their ideas. And so we would like to look at a way that we could do that as well, so that we know what some of the questions are of our parents and of our staff as we prepare to return to school. So that is the proposal that I am making, and we would like to move forward with that. I'd like to move forward with the creation of the steering committee as soon as next week, and then begin our subgroup committee work in the following weeks after that, with the goal of having proposals in place by the end of June for the board to review and consider.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Input from the board, questions? Mrs. Burton.
I'm just thankful that we're a part of a district that is thinking through and not waiting for decisions to be made before we make some plans for action, so that whatever is coming down the pike, when we hear more definitively, we're prepared and we're taking action. I'm also really thankful that we're taking the route that we have done in the past, which is to involve all of our stakeholder groups in these plans and these decisions. So thank you very much for your thoughtfulness in this proposal.
Mrs. Frank?
I agree with Mrs. Burton. I don't think I could add anything. I love the amount of thought that has gone into this and the amount of areas that we do need to think about, as opposed to just what's it going to look like when we open. But it might not open all the way. It might be revised, and what pieces is it going to look like? And so I think that taking a really hard look at the way we do education and education changing is really wise. And I love the amount of stakeholders that you're bringing into this discussion, really a thoughtful discussion for September, but also for how we do education from now on. So I think it's really great.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. I appreciate the proactive approach and like my colleagues have already said, the opportunity to bring the community together so that people are involved and understand that it's not as simple as they think. It's not flipping a switch. And we need to have involvement from so many different stakeholders so that we understand what's on their minds as well as sharing what's on ours. It's not going to be easy, and we're making it up as we go, but to start ahead of time gives us a lot more flexibility. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Mr. Centers?
Yeah, along the same lines, I think, we are optimistic that things will be hopefully ready to go back to school, but I don't think any of us know for sure. So I like that we're planning for all eventualities, worst case, best case, and in between. I think that'll help our district be prepared for whatever the future brings. So I think that's very thoughtful, and just thank you for putting this together. It's going to be I think it'll really help us come fall.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Others? Seeing none, we set this template up many, many years ago with our forums and involvement of our community members. We've always looked for this input. We've always been ahead of the curve, and we're doing that again. So kudos to the staff for putting this together. It sounds like we're all on board and in favor of this. So I would say go ahead with your plans, and we're all behind you.
Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you. We are excited to get started. We have, as you know, very creative and innovative thinkers, and we will need all of those to contribute to the discussion. And I can tell you, we shared with our administrators last week that we'd be bringing this recommendation forward to the board, and I think they were very, very supportive of the idea and had shared with their staff, who certainly have questions about what will next year look like, that we were going to be doing this. And I had already started getting messages from people asking about an opportunity to contribute to the task force or to serve on it. And that is certainly emblematic of our staff and who they are, that they would want to jump right in and be part of that work. So I know our cabinet team is looking forward to leading that charge, and we are ready to roll. So thank you for your support.
Very good. We'll then move on to item 2B, update on class of 2020 special events, and we'll hear from Mr. Willenborg.
Thank you, President Johnson. Good evening, one and all. I think what started as kind of an exciting phone call in the morning of March 13th, telling class of 2020 and all students to go back to bed, there's no school today, has certainly turned into a unfathomable journey of darkness and disappointment, and no school for the rest of the school year. I think we all can agree that the class of 2020 has been dealt, a poor hand. And I'm sure even the senior with the worst case of senioritis never wanted to be where we find ourselves now, and is probably praying and hoping, for a chance to return to school. It's not going to happen. Throughout the last 2 months of no in-person school, the school principals, the student activities directors, the senior class council supervisors, student council members have all been involved in trying to figure out how we can end the school year with an exclamation point. In addition, many staff members, teachers, and parents, have sent us many emails and left messages, with their inputs and thoughts regarding that topic. On March 27th, we sent a letter to all seniors letting them know that nothing has been canceled regarding the end of the year events, and that we realize how significant those events of honors night, senior prom, and the graduation commencement are in their lives. They certainly mean a lot to us as well. The superintendent shared in her April videos and in a letter of April 29th to the class of 2020 her heartfelt support and acknowledgement of their hard work through this difficult time. The principals and I sent another letter to seniors at the end of April to update them on our current, planning. That letter also asked them to complete a survey so we could better gauge their thinking as we try to end up the year. Now, I want to emphasize we've been working diligently to preserve our special events. However, the virus remains a dangerous and significant threat, to our community, and we are wise and legally bound to honor the orders of the state. We have been in close contact with the Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators, and the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals. Those organizations have informed us that even with the end of the stay-at-home orders, which end on May 28th, it's highly unlikely that large gatherings of hundreds or thousands of people will be allowable through most of the summer. Social distancing standards are likely, to be around for a long time as well. Life as we know it, has certainly changed. So let me update you, where we are, now. There's the three biggies: senior honors nights, senior prom, senior graduation commencement. Senior honors night, is an event usually held in May, to honor our highest achievers at each school. We are presently in a stay-at-home order. We can't run those ceremonies. We've scheduled a virtual event that will be released to our school and district websites, and other social media outlets and the LPS cable station, on June 2nd. Currently, the student activities directors, principals are piecing that together with a bunch of slides and recognitions for our students. So for our seniors honors night, we're planning that as a virtual event to be released on June 2nd. Regarding senior prom, each of our prom dates, and they're originally scheduled throughout May, they've been postponed, and it's increasingly unlikely we'll be able to have a traditional senior prom. Working with student council executive boards, we have developed, we leaned on two contingency plans for senior prom. One, if it's allowable later in the summer, that we would have some type of senior gathering at the home school, with music and, maybe pull in some food trucks and the like, and, give those seniors a chance to see each other one last time before they venture off into their new lives. Certainly we may have to still honor social distancing. It's something, we'd still have to do a lot of planning for. Another thought is to invite the class of 2020 to the class of 2021 prom next year. And that was brought up by several students that, maybe we could tag on with that. And, that remains a distinct possibility with a lot of merit. The biggie, of course, is graduation commencement. The significant factor, how will we do it? Will we be able to gather in the thousands? Probably not. Will social distancing guidelines still be in effect? Probably so. Another significant factor to consider is that the further we push into the summer, further push into July and August, the more challenging it will be for making a match with everyone's summer plans. We also recognize there will be a loss of excitement and a lack of interest, quite frankly, the deeper we go into the summer. In August, many students, I'm sure, will be focused more on their new lives, and many will be focused on their college plans. Our first choice for graduation commencement would be to simply change the date, and we are still currently penciled in at USA Hockey Arena on the second weekend of August. It's penciled in. So But many of us, I think, would question, or at least are not sure whether that's the best plan. So another contingency plan is, to distribute our caps and gowns during the week we normally would, May 25th, after Memorial Day, and then have a drive-up diploma pickup on our regularly scheduled weekend. That's the last weekend in May. And we can adjust the dates and the times, but, students could be in their cap and gown in a car with their parents, drive up to a location at the school. We could hand them, their diploma and their diploma cover, and then we could have another station where they can get out of the car, possibly in front of the school sign, the arch, that has your name, and, in a few minutes, have them jump out, take some pictures there in front of that sign, and they would, drive up. So that's a thought of a drive-up diploma pickup, but a few weeks later, we'd want to do something more attached to that, which would include and I'm talking later in June, maybe the weekend of the 20th, maybe before, maybe after, but we would, try to finish it up by June, that we would have a decorated car parade. Each school could have, students assemble in their car, decorated car, and drive through their own residential areas. We could devise a route, make that happen. And later that same day, to provide a virtual ceremony, something that's been, puts pictures of all the kids together, videos, speeches, that would be uploaded to YouTube, and again put on all our social media outlets and the LPS cable channel later that evening. And like I say, we could do that on possibly the 13th or the 20th, that weekend. So, there's goods and bads, payoffs and benefits to the different things we try to plan for. The biggest fear is if we plan for something later in the summer and there's a spike in cases and all the orders, stay-at-home orders and the like, come back into effect. So there's multiple factors, multiple variables that make this very challenging. Our heart goes out to the class of 2020. We are engaged in communicating with them, but wanted to lay that out for the Board of Education. Want you to would like to gauge your thinking and allow you to weigh in on our planning for these class of 2020 events.
I'm going to just add a couple of things before we ask you to weigh in. And so thank you so much, Mr. Wollenberg, not only for that summary, but for all of the time that our principals and student activities directors and senior class sponsors have been putting in, along with consulting with, with many of our students on this and going through the hundreds of surveys we received from our students. This is certainly one of the biggest decisions and situations before us really throughout this whole closure. The class of 2020 has been in the forefront of our thinking, and certainly as it relates to graduation, we all understand that. I think for many of you, you'd say that's one of the highlights of your year. And I'm not even talking when you have a graduate. And I know that we have many folks who have had, will currently have this year, and in the future will have graduates. So I know for you how special this is. And that goes for every single parent and student throughout our district. And certainly we would love to just recreate that. We'd love to just pick up and move our date to another date. And just so you know, we are trying to get additional, seeking additional guidance from the state and from the governor's office, because really one of our questions is do we see a window at any point this summer, probably before mid-August, because then students begin to leave to go to school, but is there a point where we would be allowed to gather, anywhere from say 1,500 to 2,000 or 3,000 folks? Because with the number of graduates we have, the staff that would be involved, and then even if they each only brought a few guests, and we know many of our children have liked to have brought many more, but on the survey, it was very important to students that they were able to consider bringing more than just their parents. So we would be in the neighborhood of about 1,500 to 3,000, depending on the school and the number of people. And one of the things we're really asking is, will there be a window that the state could envision that we would be allowed to do that? And what we don't want to do is move the date, have everyone be hopeful for that, and then not be able to move forward with it. And so I certainly appreciate the desire for folks to have that in-person ceremony that we've all come to love. But I also am grateful for the creative thinking that's gone into some of these ideas to plan for our seniors that allow them to be at the school, to be in some way, shape, or form within that same time frame that they normally would have received their diploma, be in their cap and gown at the school, and then the consideration of if we can't have an in-person, creating a wonderful virtual video of that, and then perhaps a car parade. So while a final decision hasn't been made, I appreciate all the effort in the people that have gone into thinking about these plans. And we would just love to hear your feedback and your thoughts on those ideas. And as we begin to move forward and hope to make a decision within the next week or so.
Okay, Mrs. Burton. Mute.
Sorry about that. Thank
No,
you.
you're good.
Has any consideration been given to having an outdoor ceremony as we have had in years past?
Absolutely. I mean, to provide something at the football field and space the students out, to cover all 20 yard lines, there's it's doable. It's something we've discussed. When you add potentially 3,000-4,000 people that might attend that, we run into that same problem. Will we be able to gather in those large numbers? Major League Baseball is going to run baseball games without a crowd. I don't think we really can run a commencement ceremony without parents and guests. At least in the virtual ceremony, they're still with themselves, although it would be at home. So it's, that is it is something we considered and are still considering.
Okay.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. I appreciate all the forward thinking and the creative ideas. Has anyone given thought to whatever we decide, whatever the final plan is, to streaming it live so that people can see it, even if they live in a different state, if grandma and grandpa live in a different state. So while we have a lot of changes and challenges with this situation, sometimes there's a silver lining too.
Sure.
I believe if it is on YouTube, we do have our own YouTube channel, so we would be able to stream anything concurrently with cable and all of those types of things, yes.
Mr. Centers, did you have something to add? Okay.
No, thank you though. I was just messing with my camera because I'm in and out.
Anyone else?
Mr. Johnson.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes, thank you. I thank you for all your hard work on this. I know this is on the hearts and minds of many seniors, including myself, my son. So we're looking for something good and exciting. And I think I do like the idea of the cap and gown, receiving it, and maybe doing a drive-up diploma. I don't know if it'd be possible for I don't know how you could do it. We do have big areas in front of the school. If it's possible, you could spread, 20 kids out at a time and then have the cars, those subsequent cars, and they could pick up their diploma and somebody could actually hand it to them. And maybe we could videotape the whole thing so that at a later time you could watch it or somebody else could watch their family member receive their diploma in some way. I don't know. It is such a tough tough thing. The problem is getting everybody out of their cars. And I mean, it would take a lot of work to coordinate, obviously, with you have 400 students, but maybe there could be a separate time frame for a certain amount, like A through alphabetically, and you could line them up and they could each, like A through L or something, could have their time where they could walk up, get their diploma, and then do it later. So you wouldn't have so many cars in the parking lot, but something of that nature, I think, is a great idea, especially out in front of the school. If you could receive your diploma, a family could take the photos and then get back in their car and then they would leave. I think, I mean, I don't know. I guess we have to be very creative in these circumstances. I do like the idea of the car parade. I think that's great. The virtual ceremonies, a good idea. Yeah, I like all your ideas. It's such a daunting task. I wish we didn't have to try to figure this issue out, but great ideas. And thank you for trying to put them together. I know that's on the minds of everybody. I keep getting questions from parents. Have they decided what they're going to do for graduation? Have they? And it's not an easy decision to make. I know some of the smaller districts probably are able to do things a little bit easier, but with a district our size, I think it presents a lot of different issues. So anyways, that's just my 2 cents. Thank you for everything, and I'll get through it, I'm sure. Figure something out.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. Other comments? Mrs. Frank?
I agree with all of them, and I think you're on the right track. I think that you all need to make the best decision. I think that we can, in this particular instance, I think what you're doing is fantastic. Looking at it, I would like to see them, like Mrs. Bradford said, be able to get out at some point and receive something, even if we're wearing gloves and masks, or whatever it is. I do think that that's a piece of actually receiving a diploma is a big deal, if we can make that happen. But again, it's a lot of logistics. So I think you guys are on the right track.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Anyone else? And Mrs. Oquist, don't they have, and just something running through my mind, at USA Hockey, don't they have an outdoor, like a drive-in theater screen?
They do have that, and that is something that we talked about with the student activities directors, and is something we've talked about with USA Hockey Arena. We've gotten some feedback. Certainly we have not ruled out anything yet. That is, certainly one of those pieces. That's certainly one of those pieces that we could consider. But what we have gotten some feedback in our county group that that type of ceremony has taken place in some other states in a similar format, and that it was a bit difficult to manage that many groups in vehicles, and some of the horns, and some of the attentiveness, and getting everyone focused in the same direction. So while that's something we are still considering, there were some feedback that we had gotten that was a bit challenging to manage that particular environment for that many people in that way. But you are all thinking along the same lines on many of the things that we've been considering as well.
Yeah. And if I could add, we have been in continual contact with USA Hockey Arena. That idea certainly, we've talked about with them. One of the things they stress is that if you're thinking of using the screens at all, it's not going to be dark till 9 o'clock. So that's another thing to consider.
Well, I think this is something that is in continual change, and we're going to have to find out the best thing that we can for our seniors. Is just a very, very difficult thing. Okay, anything else on this point? If not, we'll move on to item 3, our Finance Committee, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Bonifield.
Thank you, President Johnson. So we have, I feel like Mr. Centers tonight. I'm taking his place. We have several items to cover tonight. So the first item we're going to cover is the budget update, and Mrs. Smith is going to help us with that.
Thank you, Ms. Bonnefield. I was feeling the same way. This is quite the list for the Finance Committee this week. The first item, as you said, was a budget update. The board will recall I provided a budget update on April 27th. And even since then, we've gotten some additional information and we wanted to share that. There was a joint memo that came out between the Michigan Department of Education, the Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators, the Michigan Association of School Boards, and then the Michigan School Business Officials. They came out with a memo on April 30th recommending that districts prepare for multiple budget scenarios. So I wanted to present that to the board tonight. I'll share my screen and hopefully you can see that. I'll walk through each one of the scenarios that was recommended by that memo that came out. So they suggested preparing a budget going from a decrease of $200 per pupil and then in $150 increments up from there. So in scenario 1, we see what the impact of a $200 per pupil decrease would be. In scenario 2, a $350 per pupil decrease. Scenario 3 is a $500 per pupil decrease. And scenario 4 is a $650 per pupil decrease. I will mention before we get started, there's a revenue estimating conference scheduled for May 15th, which we're all very much looking forward to, just to get a better idea of where the state revenues are estimated to be. So we will know kind of where we will be falling on the scenario range. So that is taking place this Friday, May 15th. And then MSBO has scheduled a debrief on Monday to digest, what we hear on Friday. So we'll continue to look for all the information that we can and pass that on to the board as we go. So I'll jump in. What you see on the screen, again, is 4 different scenarios. In all of the cases, you can see our beginning projected fund balance is the same. We're excited to see we finally hit that 20% fund balance, which is the top of the recommendation range from MSBO as far as what your fund balance percentage should be. And we've hit it just in time because we're going to need to tap into that for this coming year so that we can maintain our programs for our students without having to make, any program cuts at this point. So,
Mrs. Smith,
sure.
are you able to enlarge the screen at all?
Sure. Let me, is that better? On my screen, it kind of cuts off the edges, but if you can see that, I don't know if it cuts it off at all for you.
It did cut it off a little bit with that last increase.
There we go.
There you go.
Allison, can you maximize your whole screen, or is that as maximize it will go?
You know what? Does that make it bigger?
Does everybody, I just have a quick question. Is it only a small, that's a little better. Is that only a small portion of the screen? We can't get it all on our screen?
That
I'm
looks
seeing-
good right there.
That's
Oh,
If
that's
she wants to go
better.
back to what she was doing, you guys can also jump out of grid view for a moment and just go into speaker view, and you'll see a larger image for what she's presenting.
Okay, how do you do that, Keith, again? I'm sorry.
No problem. It's either the 3 dots at the bottom or the grid, the 9 square at the top.
Okay, I'm sorry, when we go into the 3 dots at the bottom, what am I looking for?
Layout.
Change layout?
Yep. And then that'll help you there.
Okay,
If you choose Spotlight, you get the whole screen.
thank you.
Perfect. So I'll have to forewarn you, I can't see you now. So if you do have a question, feel free to interrupt me as I go through. I'm happy to stop and answer any questions. So in all of these scenarios, what was important to us is that we maintain that fund balance. Again, the recommended range for MSBO is 15 to 20%. So you'll see in each one of the scenarios, we made sure to keep that fund balance within that range. We wanted to be conservative with that, not knowing what next year beyond 2021, what 21, 22 will look like. We didn't want to use too much of the fund balance, again, not knowing what the following year will look like. So under each one of these scenarios, we're projecting a student loss of about 200 students, and that would mean about a $1.7 million revenue loss to the general fund. And then in each one of the scenarios, we can see what the impact of the various per pupil decreases would be, ranging anywhere from $2.7 million all the way up to almost $9 million. It would be a $9 million loss to our general fund if we were to see a $650 per pupil decrease. So we can then see what that would do to our projected revenue for next year. As I move on to the projected expenditures, I started with $160.9 million. That's assuming our current programs remain in place for next year. And then as well as that includes some of the costs that we are deferring from this year to next year. Things such as the school bus purchase that we received the grant for that won't be received by June 30th, going ahead and building that into the 2021 budget. So that is that first line. You'll see we've added a line for cost containments. So the cabinet team has been meeting regularly to go over the budget. And one of the things we wanted to do was identify what are some purchases that we could potentially put off, and or if there was anything that we could reconfigure to see some savings on the expenditure side. So in each one of these scenarios, we've identified $612,000 worth of costs that we could hold off on for next year and defer to the next year. An example would be a modification to our textbook adoptions. That would be something that would save us money this year, but as we know, there's definitely a need for replacement of the textbook, so that would be a cost that we would have to recognize in future budgets. On scenario one, if we were to see a $200 per pupil decrease, we would have room within the budget to recommend some program enhancements, which we will go into detail in just a minute, and still maintain a fund balance that's within the MSBO recommended range. That would put us at an ending funding balance of 17%. Under the scenario two, to stay above the 15%, we wouldn't be able to institute all the recommendations. We'd have to peel back about $300,000 of that, again, to keep within the MSBO recommended range. Under the scenario three, if we were to see a $500 per pupil decrease, that would mean just instituting the cost containments and wouldn't allow for any additional expenditures for next year, and that would put us right at 15%. And then in the last scenario with the $650 per pupil decrease, not only would it be the $612,000 of cost containment that we've seen in each scenario, but we would have to identify an additional $1.5 million worth of savings in the 2021 budget in order to maintain a 15% fund balance for next year. So multiple scenarios there. Obviously something that we're following very closely. We're very appreciative that we have been able to build our savings for times such as this, when many districts across the state are scrambling and are needing to plan for cuts for next year. We are able to still maintain our programs for our students. We've been able to do a number of wonderful things for the students with the Wayne County Enhancement Millage Funds. We're looking to continue those programs. We know that they've been so impactful for our students, so we're obviously very hesitant to cut any of those, but we also are mindful of our dollars and wanting to be responsible with the funds we've been entrusted with. This bottom line is just to illustrate what each scenario would mean in terms of the use of our fund balance, and it goes from anywhere from $5 million all the way up to almost $8.5 million. So this is something, again, we'll continue to monitor very closely. We'll be watching the revenue estimating conference on Friday, and again, taking part of the debrief with MSBO on Monday. I do want to pause and turn it over to Superintendent Oquest to talk about some of the proposed program enhancements we would potentially be recommending if we fell into the scenario 1 or 2 range.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. So as you know, at the last committee of the whole meeting, we had indicated to you that one of the things that we would like to recommend to you is that we continue to move forward with the budget in place that we've worked on so diligently these past 3 years, and continue to recognize the enhancements we've made through the Wayne County Enhancement Millage, specifically as it relates to impact on student learning and direct impact in the classroom. And so on that same path, we were hopeful to be able to continue to move forward this year on things like maintaining and lowering class size where feasible, although we've made some significant inroads, as we shared with you in the fall, thanks to the enhancement millage. There are still high pockets at both the elementary and secondary level that we would like to tackle this coming year. There are some additional social emotional supports that we were hopeful to be able to put in place. And while we won't be able to bring forward to you all of the things that we had looked at within that first and second scenario, built into that would be some recommendations for some limited additional support in that very, very important area for our students. Another area, and again, I'm just giving you broad categories because we wanted to get a sense from you about the scenarios and how they're laid out. And then at our next meeting, at our study session, we'll be bringing more detail to you about each of the recommendations. But those are a couple of the areas, in addition to things like continuing to grow our Project Lead the Way offerings for students. We put a lot of time, effort, and funding behind starting that pathway, that STEM pathway for our students. We would like to continue to expand it on both ends and have some great possibility there. So those are just some of the examples that we'd like to consider. Certainly there were a number of others that we had hoped to look at as well. But as you know, those very much match the priorities that are for district priority areas, as well as those that we set with the Wayne County Enhancement Millage dollars. So again, that is only, those are only recommendations we would bring forward if we were in scenario 1 or 2. So again, on the lower end of the per pupil cut, and I'm not sure that we would have ever imagined a couple of months ago talking about a $200 student cut to be on the lower end of anything, but we certainly know that we've gotten that guidance. I shared that information with all of you after we received it from those organizations Mrs. Smith had mentioned. And as you know, we were well on our way to creating multiple scenarios. We were just using a few different dollar figures with the per pupil cuts. So instead, we went right in line with those that they recommended from those organizations to bring to you. So that is the framework in which we're working. And what we would like to bring to you at our study session is a detailed review, as we normally do in a PowerPoint, with regard to each of those program enhancements, the cost of it and how it would impact our students directly, and then make those recommendations based on the budget that comes to us from the state. And then as we move forward from the study session to the committee of the whole, by time we bring to you the final budget, and I believe that is on June 17th, if I'm not mistaken, for you to consider for approval, we would hopefully have some additional narrowing of that band, because we are anticipating that the conference will take place this Friday, and then we've been told in all likelihood another one mid-June. So we'd welcome your feedback if you feel that that's on the right track, and if you are comfortable with us planning for those scenarios, either in program enhancement or cost containment, depending on where on the continuum we will fall based on the school aid budget.
I am absolutely in favor of the plans that you're putting forth. I'm glad we are planning on using our fund balance, let me back up first and say, as I have in the past, thank you so much to all of our staff and community that has worked so hard for so many years in order to build up our fund balance. Because Mrs. Smith, you're absolutely right. We built it up 4 times such as these. And the last time we got hit, it was rather unexpected. It was $420 a student in October after we had already started our year. And that was within this past 10 years. And now we find ourselves hit again rather unexpectedly. But this is why our community has worked so hard, and our staff and our teams have worked so hard to build up this fund balance so that we can weather storms. And we all know we're in a storm. That being said, this is what it's for. And especially seeing as we're looking at 1 year of this at this point, and we'll have to take it year by year. But for this first year, I am absolutely in favor of utilizing a chunk of our fund balance in order to preserve our programs for our students. We are here first and foremost to educate students. And if we have that fund balance available to us, I say we need to use it. I'm very pleased that you have proposals that are going to keep us within a recommended range of that fund balance while still being able to support our students to the best of our ability. Again, I doubt this whole financial situation is going to be a 1 year situation, but for year 1, we can afford to utilize our fund balance, maintain our programs, then I'm in favor of doing so. And thank you very much for the hard work you've put together in putting these proposals together. I know this is not something you just snap up in an hour or two. So thank you so much.
Mrs. Frank?
I agree with all of that that's been said. I think that this is really hard decisions that we're making, and it's hard to even, like you said, Superintendent Oquist, to fathom that we're here making them. I just have a logistical question. Mrs. Oquist, would it be helpful for us to move our voting meeting back? You said the next update will be middle of July, and I think if we're voting on the 17th, would it be helpful to have more information and move our meeting back a week? It's something you can think about, but I think that we all would be flexible if that's what we need to do to get a more complete picture, because I think there are two, anyway, I just think as things are changing and we're getting updates, it might be helpful to push it back if we need to.
Thank you so much for that offer, and we will absolutely keep that in mind. We appreciate your flexibility.
Liz?
Thank you. I agree with what Colleen said, that this is really why we have been building up our fund balance. And I won't lie, when I saw the projections for budget cuts and the range that MASB had told us, I couldn't sleep that night. That really is, those are big numbers. And, you know, we don't like any budget cuts, but here we are planning for some pretty serious budget and revenue changes. So thank you to everybody who helped us build that up all these years that we were saying, you never know, we might need it someday. Well, here we are. And I also agree that taking it 1 year at a time is a prudent way to do it. We don't know what next week's going to be, let alone next year. So as we move forward, again, maintaining our judicious use of our revenues and looking for opportunities to increase those as we may. All I can tell you is thank God that now we can realize that we're doing our best work and that we have prepared for this moment. And for that, I am most grateful.
President Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. One question first. Allison, looking at your budget, your 2021 revenue, your top line is consistent across all scenarios. I'm assuming there are assumptions in that line that revenue, that there is no increase or decrease in per pupil funding. Am I correct on that?
Yep. So the first line on the revenue is consistent across all the scenarios. And so that's again, assuming, looking at this year's revenue and going through to see which ones will be consistent for next year, and then adjusting accordingly. And then below that was 2 different lines, one for the student loss and then one for the per pupil decrease. So the overall projected revenue is different for each scenario. From the low end, if we saw a $200 per pupil decrease, our revenue would be about 156.5 million. And then with a $650 per pupil decrease, it would be 150 million. So, so yeah, but across the top, the first kind of the base or where we start from for each scenario is the same. And that does assume that number could change. We will have more information on that when we get together for our study session, because that does have some assumptions, again, assuming we're operating all of our program-based or program fee-based, I'm going to try this again, fee-based programs for next year. And obviously we'll have more information in the next couple of weeks of what programs will be running and when they'll be starting and whatnot. So did that answer the question, Mark?
Yes, I just wanted to make my sure that my assumptions are correct. I agree that this is the reason why we have a fund balance. It's for a rainy day, and quite honestly, this is more than a rainy day. This could be a monsoon. So it is. That's what it's there for. This is when we need to use it. So I'm all in favor of it. Thank you.
Crystal?
The other thing I was just thinking about when you talked about the increase of supports, I guess, and we can talk about this more, Andrea, in our study session. Is that what we're talking about, or do you want feedback now? Or that's going to be for the next meeting? You were just presenting information?
We would welcome your feedback now, and I know I did not give you detailed information. That will be for our study session, but I would very much welcome your feedback on those general categories that I shared.
I guess one of the things I know that we talked, Allison mentioned just cost savings with textbooks, and then I think you said we wanted to invest in Project Lead the Way, and I am absolutely all for STEM, and we need to do more or continue to develop that program. But I guess if it's one or the other, I guess I would say when we did that analysis of our textbook, that's such a high need in our district. I would put that as one of the highest needs in our district, is that textbook adoption. And so if you're looking at the two, I guess that's where I would come in on weighing that, because I think that we have significant need for that. And we've also done a lot of work in terms of the committees that have done a lot of work on that. And I know some of them were just finishing up their, or hoping to finish up their work. And I think that that covers a lot of students, and not just a niche student, but I think that covers a lot of our students that are in our district.
I will ask to speak to that just for a moment, because it really is a reduction. We would still be doing quite a few textbook adoptions next year, but a reduction in how many we do. But Mrs. O'Brien, would you speak to that, please?
Yeah, so I just wanted to share with you. So we were very conscious of thinking about the amount of time, and in moving several of our textbook committees from this current school year to next year, we were just very specific about not adding too many. Again, the coordinators can only lead so many textbook committees at once anyway. So the ones that needed to move to next year, we were just very cautious about not adding too much, and very specific about then taking some of the textbooks and just moving them a year. So if they really haven't started, next year would be the year to do the professional development, not necessarily look at materials. So we were very, very pinpoint thinking about, what we would need the funds for next year. And then, in order to set aside some additional Wayne County enhancement millage monies to use next year. And then the following year, we would pick back up if we can. If we needed to look at the timeline and do some shifting, we would do that also. So we're not asking to take anything off of the plate at this point. We're just looking at being very specific about when and which content areas.
And just to expand on that too, the projected expenditures that I shared, we had originally planned on a budget of $1.5 million for textbooks for 2021. And so we're representing in there about a $500,000 reduction. So that still does leave $1 million worth of textbook purchases for the coming school year.
Mr. Centers, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I was just, I echo Mark's sentiments that you know, really this is, you know, one of the most traumatic things we could expect as far as budget wise. So I would just want to echo sentiments that, you know, it's appropriate to use fund balance to maintain our programs as much as possible. And, you know, I think also that just the thoughtful consideration about delays in textbooks and then also thinking through that process. I appreciate that.
Anybody else? Okay. Mrs. Smith, do you have anything else on this topic?
I don't, other than just to let you know, we'll continue to monitor this very closely and of course, bring more information to you at our study session.
Okay. We'll move on to 3B then, which is the Wayne Risa budget, and Mrs. Smith will help us with that.
Thank you. Just a reminder for everybody. So our ISD, our Intermediate School District Wayne Risa, annually shares with us their proposed budget for the coming school year. They do that, it's a requirement. And their hope is to solicit feedback from their local districts, either in support of or disapproval of their budget. And they're really looking for, you know, feedback on that. They'll take that to their board at the end of this month, and then just like us, they're required to have a proposed budget approved by June 30th for the coming school year. So in looking at it, there was nothing really that stood out, nothing of alarm. They continue to have a healthy fund balance for this year and projected for next year. The two funds that I specifically kind of hone in on are their general fund as well as their Act 18 funds. The Act 18 funds, again, are very healthy, and we appreciate we're seeing in the approvals for our programs that we're operating that they are making efforts to put program enhancements in place for the Act 18 program. We saw an increase, for example, in the program supervision, you know, recognizing that we have programs that span a number of our buildings, and it takes a lot to get around and evaluate and, you know, offer support. We've seen it as far as when we look at individual student supports we've requested, that they've approved that. So the ISD continues to be very open and, you know, looking for our feedback and how they can best support us. So I feel very supportive of the budget that they've given us. And again, that was included in the packet. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that. But overall, very positive budget for the ISD.
Any questions? Colleen?
Mrs. Smith, it looked to me like the budget would be including the same money that we have been receiving for, I believe it is additional transportation costs over the last few years. I think, if I remember correctly, they built it into the budget last year. It looks to me like it's built into the budget again this year. Is that your assumption also?
Yes, that is correct.
And that was somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000?
It was. I can tell you the exact. Yep. And even this year, we even saw a little bit of an increase over the previous year as well. I want to say in the ballpark of maybe an additional $30,000 or $40,000, something like that.
Okay, good. Good.
Yep.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any questions? Mark?
Yeah, Allison, looking at the RISA general fund,
Mm-hmm.
they're not projecting any reduction in their state sources. I mean, their revenue is only, their projection is only down $200,000 for next year.
I think that's something they'll be monitoring very closely, and reading through some of the narratives, they've acknowledged that COVID could have an impact on their state sources as well. But by the time they had to share this with us so that we could share it with our board, they didn't feel like they had enough information. So I'm assuming they'll be making budget amendments early next year when they have more information on what their actual funding will be. But similar to us, now I don't have the number in front of me what their fund balance percentage is, but they have a very high fund balance percentage. So even in the event too that they see the you know, pretty significant cut in their state sources, thankfully they also have a healthy fund balance to help them weather that for this coming year and then readjust for the following year.
And they did at least reference that in their FAQ in the back. And they made reference to the COVID and the volatility, and it may change. So,
Mhm.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Allison, do we need to, is this a voting item at all, or we just
Yeah.
have to, we do
Yes.
need to vote on that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, if we're set on B, let's go to C, appointment of the auditors.
Thank you. I'm bringing forward a recommendation to appoint Plant Moran as our auditors for the 2020 school year. Plant Moran is the largest accounting firm here in the state of Michigan, and they have a very large group that focuses on the K-12 accounting needs. And they continue to be very useful in throughout the year, not only during this audit. Again, they go through all of our books, testing our internal controls, looking at different transactions to make sure we're following our board policies and state laws. They do that, as part of their audit, but then they're also available throughout the year, kind of at no additional charge. That's included in this audit fee when questions come up. If there's a new GASB coming out and we have a question on, what the proper way to do that is, they're very quick to get their experts involved and answer those questions for us, so we can be on the forefront for that. So they've been wonderful partners for us for a number of years. I do want to acknowledge their price for this school year includes a 2% increase. In my memo, we actually got an updated contract after that, so the amount will be $900 for this coming year, an increase of $900, bringing the total cost up to $46,800. And I want to acknowledge the fact that we did go back to Plant Moran. Their initial fee that they had requested for this year was higher, and we shared, in light of the budget cuts that we were anticipating from the state, we asked if they could work on that at all, and thankfully they were able to bring their fee down. So we want to thank them for, acknowledging that we are in a very unusual financial position right now, and we want to be good stewards again of our taxpayer resources. So we thank them for adjusting this fee for the 2020 school year. We do think that's a fair amount what they've requested, and I would like to recommend that we do appoint them as our auditors for this coming fiscal year end.
Questions? Okay. We're good? All right, then we're gonna vote on this on, is it the 18th, Allison?
Yes, please. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so we're headed down the list to D. The contract extension for the sinking fund owners rep. And Allison, you're on the spot again.
Thank you. So this is a result, this is coming to you tonight because our community was so gracious in approving our sinking fund replacement request this past August. So as you know, our sinking fund that was set to end at the end of this calendar year has been approved to go on for an additional 10 years. And we've also been granted an increase in the millage so that we could increase the number of projects and scope that we're able to accomplish through the sinking fund. So our current owners rep, Cressa, has been on with us. Their current contract is set to expire at the end of this calendar year. So what this is a contract extension that would take place effective January 1st. Their fees are in line with what they were in the original agreement as far as the percentage goes. The actual monthly charge has been adjusted because our sinking fund scope and the volume has increased since the original contract was agreed to. This would be something that they continue to bill on a monthly basis. The contract would run for an additional 3 years. It would terminate on December 31st, 2023. And it would be at that time we could choose to renew it again or not if we so choose. So we've been, just to reiterate, very pleased with the value that Plant Moran Cressa has brought to our district. They continue to be experts in the fields that we are in, that we're doing construction. They bring that expertise. They also bring significant cost savings just because of their pulse on the projects and where different areas are that we can save money. They brought multiple, recommendations to us that have helped us save money across the years. So we definitely think this would be a good investment for our district. We appreciate the community support to maintain our facilities, and we appreciate Plant Moran Cressa partnering with us so that we can move forward with these projects and keep our facilities and these investments up to the community standards. So,
Okay, guys, anybody have any, Crystal?
Sorry.
You're-
It's just not as easy to jump on and off and ask questions. So when you're on a Zoom call, but Allison, I did want to say in regards to the last piece, thank you so much for going back and on behalf of the community, on behalf of the Board of Education, for going back to get the best possible negotiated price for our accounting firm. I just think it is easy when you have a relationship with somebody to just continue it, but thank you for doing the hard thing for our community, because I think as we're talking about these decisions and these costs, it is very big and it's very real right now when we are going through such a hard time as a community. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being so cognizant of where we are as a community. I think that's so wise. And I'm just going to ask you in this one to just walk me through a little bit, and maybe everyone else got it, but tell me again, you said about the percentage. The percentage is the same that we've paid since the beginning of the bond. Is that correct, what you said? To Plant Moran?
I believe, yep, yes. And I should have pointed out, we've invited Paul Terrio too from Cressa on to join us. And so he will be able to hop on. But yes, the fee is consistent, but their original contract was based on, I want to say the volume was like $4 million, because there are, or it might have even been $3.5 million worth of projects on an annual basis. Now with the new sinking fund, the replacement sinking fund, we're estimating we're going to bring in about $7 million. The full $7 million isn't baked into the cost that Cressa is proposing on here, because they do recognize some of that will be IT purchases that we'll handle ourselves. We also allocate about $500,000 for projects that we do ourselves here in the district. So they've taken that into consideration, but the percentage fee is consistent with what it was in the original contract. But again, the volume is going from about $3.5 million a year up to, I want to say, in the neighborhood of $5.5 million, $6 million a year. So for that reason, their fee has been adjusted.
Paul, I can't, oh, go ahead. I was gonna say Paul wants to speak up. I can't see his hand, so. No?
I'm not sure I know how to
Okay.
raise my hand.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry, I don't know if I know how to raise my hand or not on Google.
No, well, it's a physical raise your hand,
Oh,
but when you're not speaking, you're not in the
Yeah.
grid.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, as Allison mentioned, our original sinking fund engagement was signed back in, I think, 2015. And over that time, the original contract was kind of structured to do about $4 million a year for 5.5 years. So about $22 million worth of projects. I believe over that time, we've actually done about 27 or 28 million. So more than we had expected, but it all kind of made sense and flowed as we were in the middle of it. So we've been happy to serve the district as always. Going forward, we're anticipating it's roughly about $6 million a year. And this would be kind of a 3-year extension. The conversation Nelson and I had was, one, let's make sure we're keeping the percentage and the logic the same as we had originally proposed. 2, I think we've added great value to that 27 or $28 million worth of work that we've executed. The last time I checked, we had saved about $3 million or more on that work to be able to then go do more roofs and do more parking lot projects and things of that nature. And then obviously over the last 5 years and the next 3, we've certainly had some staffing increase and cost increase and things along the way. We've tried to be mindful of that and manage it as best we can by bringing in some new staff here. Obviously early on, I was doing a lot of the work. Now we've got Scott Smith and Brian Weber Lisa Pitt's been helping out and some of our other staff. So, we'll try to bring on staff as we need them and be as cost conscious as we can, for the district as always. If there's an opportunity to save money and add value, we'll be all over it. So.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, I cut somebody off when I was talking to Paul. I'm sorry. Who did I cut off? Nobody? Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Colleen?
I'm in favor of going forward with this. First off, Plant Moran Cressa has been a phenomenal partner with us because we are education experts in our world. They are the construction experts. Not only has their wisdom and their guidance been valuable, but as has been alluded to, I am absolutely convinced that we've saved more than we've spent in the long run. Paul, with your knowledge of the market, with your ability to get us economies of scale, it has saved us more money, I believe, than we've spent with Cressa. And then not only that, but then that has freed up our folks to spend our time focusing more on educating our students, which is our specialty. So I'm absolutely in favor of going forward with this agreement, and thank you and your team, Paul, for the phenomenal work that you've done for years on behalf of LPS.
Thanks, Colleen. Dan?
Yeah, I just want to echo Colleen's sentiments. We certainly are not construction experts, and if you had us in the administration do the work, we certainly would not realize the savings that we do for people who work on large scales and know the market and know these contractors as well as they do. So, for us, it's money well spent because the quality product we get for our community, the trust that we've been able to earn from our community when things are done well. So for me, it's a no-brainer.
Thanks, Dan. Does anybody else? Paul, I just want to say, Phil, go. Sorry.
I just want to say that as far as it doesn't have a dollar value per se, but the folks from Plant Moran, and I've worked with several of them over the past few years with bond sinking fund, et cetera, and they truly represent the district. When they're called an owner's rep, and on a day-to-day basis of working with them and being in a pickle in one situation or trying to find information on another situation, they truly do represent Livonia Public Schools in our best interest, and try to put forth options and information and say, look, we think this is where you should go, but obviously, you're the owner, you guys are the boss, but they do that consistently, regardless of the person who from Plant Moran is working with us. So I just want to put that out there with regard to their integrity of being an owner's rep. They really are representing us. I have not felt that they're trying to walk a line or a fence to say, let's see if I can play both these sides.
Agreed. And I just like to say, I think a lot of times we're looking at the dollar value that we're receiving. I think there's also, and there's a dollar value as well, is that for anybody who's built a house or had a contractor, it's a tough business to be in. And by having Plant Moran, these contractors are, this is their lifeblood. If they get a bad reputation with Plant Moran or with Cressa, I apologize, that's going to affect their business. So I think not only is the cost savings there, but we probably receive high quality and attract a lot of really great contractors because of the relationship. And we're able to hold them accountable for the work that they're doing. And I think not only do we see the cost savings, but I believe that we see a higher quality product at the end of the days, in which also benefits the district. Does anybody else have any questions or comments that they would like to ask or anything? Okay. Thanks, Paul, for being on. Oh, Mrs. Oquist, I'm sorry.
I'd like to recommend, since we're done with item D, if we could please consider President Johnson and Mrs. Bonnefield to move on to F and then follow with E. I think that'll make more sense if we go in that
Okay.
order.
Yep.
So we could look at item F and then E. And if that's okay with you, once you call that item, I'll get us started and then turn it over to Mrs. Smith.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna close D. And then Allison, we're ready to, this is ready for a vote on Monday, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. And then so absolutely, let's move down to F, and we're gonna look at design firm for phase 2 of central office renovation. And Mrs. Oakwist, you said you're gonna start us off.
I will. Thank you so much, Mrs. Bonnefield. So, as you know, we have been talking about this project for a number of months now. Um, just to help refresh everyone's memory, the central office complex it contains 2 distinct buildings connected by a breezeway, and one building is in the neighborhood of just over 60 years old, and the other is just about 100 years old, literally. And so we are to the point where when we completed our 6 years of bond implementation and our work focusing appropriately so on each of our schools, our classrooms, and through the sinking fund, many of our athletic facilities, the branding of our schools. We were able to add additional work even this past year. We have been so proud of the efforts that this district has made, thanks to our community and the foresight of many before us to plan for this work. It has been a true enhancement of our offerings for our students and of our district and community as a whole. One of the areas that services all of our schools is our central office complex, and that was not intended to be part of the bond work or the sinking fund work. But as over the past number of years, as you know, we've had a number of different challenges with regard to the structure itself, as well as some of the mechanical, plumbing, electrical, and other issues that have arisen. And we really are at that point where we need to look at some modest renovations and updates to the central office complex. As you know, as we've talked about before, that is the area that welcomes and greets our families as they register for school. We bring in hundreds of staff members throughout each month for professional development. And it really is meant to be a service complex for all of our 23 schools and our many departments. So the board had agreed this past fall for us to engage with HED to help us do design work for the renovation of central office. So as you know, and we've been updating you since that time, we embarked on that work, and they went through interviews with members of our central office team. They surveyed everyone who worked there. We met in for a number of different meetings to talk about the functionality of that space, as well as the needed updates to, again, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and so on. And so we were really on an excellent path, and we had put money away in our savings, in our piggy bank, and part of the capital projects fund, very carefully over the past couple of years. And we felt confident that utilizing those dollars, some of which came from one-time revenue, that it would be very appropriate to use those dollars for a one-time expenditure in the renovation of central office. Again, maintaining our commitment to not utilize sinking fund dollars and bond dollars that had been previously approved by the voters, because that was never part of the proposal brought to them. Certainly it could have been allowable. It was not part of the plan that we had brought forward. So we embarked on that process. We have been working with HED. They went through the initial phase, and we're about halfway through that process. And then we had this significant shift in our world, in our world, literally and figuratively. So as we looked at the mandated closure of schools, we pumped the brakes a little bit, and we started to think, boy, not knowing what school may look like in the fall, we felt that the initial timeline to renovate central office starting in late August and continuing through December, we would have had to obviously vacate central office. We were going to be housed in a school and broken up by departments in some different areas. We really felt that this was not the best time to be doing that because we felt it was important that we were available to our parent community, to our staff, and to our leadership, and that we all remained together in one place as we started next school year with many of the uncertainties we talked about earlier in the meeting. So we talked about moving that to January and having that work take place from January until about April. And then just recently, we got the news regarding the budget. And that once again had us pump the brakes a bit and say, you know, is this the appropriate time for us to be moving forward with some of the unknowns in the budget as they exist today? So again, while we have saved for this and while we have the dollars earmarked for this, we believe that it would be most judicious to right now indefinitely postpone this project until we have a better sense of our budget status going into next fall, both with the budget from the state as well as our enrollment after the first Friday count. And we will be bringing you budget updates in October or November regarding those items. However, we are at this 1 foot in and 1 foot out with regard to our work with HED. So we've already made an investment in that process. Plant Moran Cressa has assisted us with that work. Our team has worked with both of those groups to get us to the point where we are. And so what you see before you this evening is a recommendation for phase 2 that we had talked about previously. So we were doing this work in the initial design phase and now in the actual architectural design work to lay out the specific plans that would be utilized by the contractors. We are recommending that although we're postponing the work on this, that we complete the process so that we have a full set of detailed plans based on the initial work that we did, that we are not wasting in any way, shape, or form that initial investment that we made. We're finishing the process. We'll have a complete set of plans. So when we do feel that we are in a place to move forward with this, we have the plans, they're ready to go, they're complete. And we believe that right now to finish that process would be the most prudent thing to do. A second aside, which is certainly not as paramount as the first, but a second piece is should the federal government or the state government come forward with any stimulus dollars for capital improvements, which has been done in past years during difficult budget times. When you have what they would refer to as shovel-ready projects ready to go, those are the types of projects that you are often able to have considered for funding by, again, the state or federal government in their desire to get the economy moving again. When you have projects that are complete and ready to roll, that makes you more attractive to be able to have those projects approved for additional funding. So that's really just an aside. That certainly wouldn't be the main reason why we're recommending this, but it really does provide another bonus element to completing this work now. So I wanted to update you. I know that you were all very enthusiastic about this project. Trust me, all of our colleagues at central office were too, and do not yet know that we've moved this project because we certainly wanted to bring it to the Board of Education first, but we will absolutely be communicating that with them tomorrow, that it is our recommendation we postpone this until we have some of the additional budget pieces in place. So I wanted to lay that groundwork so that we were really clear on that before Mrs. Smith brings forward the details with regard to HED and Plant Moran Cressa.
Well, thank you, Ms. Oquist. So just to build on to what Andrea shared, we completed the first phase with HED, which involved programming and assessments, and now we're looking to move on to phase 2. Phase 2 does include design, the bid award and construction administration. So the total fee for these services would be $202,600. And as Andrea shared, we are not looking to begin the construction at this point. So we would only be authorizing part of the contract. So the part of the contract that includes the design services, and that total would be $149,900 plus reimbursable costs such as mileage or printing costs. So again, at the completion of this, we'll have architectural design plans that would be ready to go when we do decide to move forward with this project.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? If nobody else does, I would like to respectfully disagree with the recommendation to postpone the construction. I think the being together in the fall is completely valid. We have the money set aside. We have critical operations that need to be performed at central office. If anybody has been in that building, it is not user-friendly, to put it mildly. We also have some top people that, you know, we are so happy and so proud of all of our central office staff, which unfortunately, when you have good people, other people are looking to recruit them. We also have retirements because a lot of these people have left. So another additional item that I think that we need to not only represent to our community and to our families is that we need to have livable working conditions for our employees who have set aside their workspace and their comfort and their the organization of the office to be able to work cohesively with each other. I think that this is a very, very important project, and the fact that the state of Michigan is going to put the education of our children in jeopardy because of some of the decisions that have been made during the pandemic, and we have the money set aside. I think that we need to move forward with this project and not let this current COVID situation put a delay on this process. I think postponing because we have to vacate the building, and I understand that, but to just simply say we're going to hold on this project simply for the fact that we don't know what the financial outcome is going to be from the state of Michigan, I respectfully disagree with that. Crystal?
I absolutely appreciate your comments, Tammy, because I think that we have such a quality staff who works out of that building. It is an amazing staff who does amazing work out of that building. And I think all of us that have been in there have all thought that it needs to be updated. And I absolutely agree. And I'm glad, Andrea, that you haven't put a time frame on when it's going to start. And I do think that holding off for now is wise. And I think not saying we're going to hold off till 2025 but we are in a time, no matter where we land, we are at a time of so many unknowns and so many things with the educational environment that we just don't know, regardless of what the state determines, where we are going as a community financially, where we are, what we are doing, property values that we had expected to be at one level will be at a different level. And so I think to be conservative right now, before we even are out of the pandemic, I think is wise. Although I would love to see, just like we would have, we'd love to see some other things. It's prudent and wise when we don't have concrete, we don't know what the future is going to hold for our community. I think it's wise to hold off right now.
Karen?
Thank you. I want to thank the administration for at least Andrea and everybody who's worked on this project I agree. I think we should hold off. I know we are all, I would love for you guys to have a brand new facility and updated, and I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but at the time that we're in right now, if I see delaying it in the fall, we just have too many unknowns to start the project. I think it's really wise to get the plans in place. I think we can take a look at it after we figure out what's going to happen in the months ahead, in the next 6 months, going into the fall and into the winter. I think it's wise to hold off, and I'm just proud of the fact that you look at it that way, because I think our community would maybe take it if they see that we're constructing, doing some construction on our admin building. I think you totally deserve it, but I do think that we might get some kickback from that from our community members, no doubt about that. I could see people saying, I don't understand why they're going ahead and doing a project when we are not getting all the books and the neat things that we need for our students. So while I would love to have the building done, and I know you guys would too, because you totally deserve it, I think it's wise just to get the plans in, hold it off a little bit, see what's happened, and then see how we can move forward. I think it's a wise move.
Dan?
Yeah, so I think I'll respectfully disagree that the building's not inhabitable. I think it's not comfortable, and it's a project that I think all of us were excited to see. That being said, our state and every state are facing enormous deficits. We don't know if the revenue is going to pick up naturally, or if we're going to have a second wave where the economy goes down again. It could be really, really bad. So I think knowing all these unknowns that are out there, doing a large capital project right now, as much as I'd love to see it done, seems to me it would be prudent to wait. So those are my 2 cents.
Liz? There you go. Yep. Still muted. Is it being fussy?
Yes, it's being fussy. Thank you.
There you go. You're good. Sorry.
I see that there's a broad range of opinions on this, and that leads me to think that we really don't have enough information at this time to be making this decision. One of the things I heard was that as this construction would be going on, that the administrative staff would be housed out of local schools. We don't know what our local schools are going to look like. We don't know if we're going to have to spread out students, or if we're going to have to utilize space in a different way. So I don't know if we have information enough to even make a statement like that we have school buildings available to house extra people, even temporarily. I love the idea of being able to do some work like this in this time when we could offer some employment opportunity to our neighbors and to people across the state. I think that's vital. But until we have enough pieces of the puzzle, we can't make this decision yet.
May I ask a
Colleen,
quick
is
question?
it okay, Phil, go.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Phil.
I just want to clarify for with the board, there's 2 items that may be being discussed, or maybe it's only 1 item. You're talking about the construction at this point, this current conversation, or are you talking about both construction and finishing design? Like, just want to clarify that.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I guess for me, I'm totally on board with finishing the project where we're at. I think my beef is with the start date with the construction. So you're right. I guess I sent the discussion off on a tangent, and I apologize to everyone for that. So to get back on track, I guess we need to make sure that we are all in agreement with the proposal to keep moving forward with the non-construction portion. So if anybody has any additional questions that they they don't want to move forward with the non-construction portion. And so I apologize, I led us astray. And Colleen, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, with the design, I'm absolutely in favor of finishing out that process. I'd like to kind of propose a happy medium to the construction portion of it, because I think both sides of that thought are valid. Most folks who very knowledgeable about our central office building are fully aware of the significant need. And in the last 5 years, we've updated every other building in our facility, but our administrative campus has been the only one that's been left untouched, and that includes our buildings on that campus. It is a significant need. The folks in our administrative building, a few years back, we had literally a window fall out because our adults are so in tune to keeping the needs of our students met and putting the dollars into our classrooms first, as it totally should be. But now we have updated all of our classrooms and all of our school buildings. We're putting the last finishing touches on those. Yet we've not invested any money in the renovation of our administrative building, and it absolutely needs to be done. I totally understand that the fall is not a good time to stick the shovel in the ground. I completely agree with that. There are too many unknowns at that time. However, rather than pushing it off a year or two, what I'd like to do is absolutely approve the design portion right now, agree that the fall is not the best time to begin, but perhaps seriously consider what would January look like. We're doing interior work on that building, not exterior work. Rather than pushing it off a whole year, I'd like to at least perhaps give our administrative team and our CRESA partners time to take a look at what might January look like. By then, we'll have some answers. We'll have some answers on the state budget. We'll have answers on our student count, and perhaps it may not be too late at that point to begin. So rather than pushing it off a year or two, I'd rather have us push it off 6 months and get some answers and find out then, when we have more information, whether we can realistically go forward with that work. If we have the money set aside for it. It is capital project money that needs to be put into, as we said, one-time expenses. This is a serious need in our district. And I don't want to see us, I can understand not doing it in the fall, but I don't want to see us pushing it down too far down the road, at least without looking at it carefully on an every 6-month basis to see if we're ready to go ahead with it.
Thanks, Colleen. That was much more eloquent than I put it.
No. You brought it up.
That was awesome.
You brought it up, and I believe you're right. We shouldn't let it go too long.
Okay. So Dan, hang on a second. I saw Crystal first.
I was just going to say, I wholeheartedly agree that we need to do this, but I guess my thought would be, let's come visit it in January and see where we're, as opposed to trying to put shovels in the ground in January, because I think still in January, we're still going to be we would need to make those decisions probably. And Paul, I'll let you answer that actually.
Go.
Well, I don't want to step in front of Dan if he wanted to add something, but I was just going to say the one thing that this does do too, if we finish the design process, is it buys us time to see what happens in the market, what happens in the community, what happens with the construction market. It's been really volatile right now, and I would absolutely, if it was ready to put out on the street, I would probably tell you to pause and wait. But this will buy us at least until the fall, because the design's going to take 3 or 4 months to finish up, and then we can reevaluate in the fall. And if we're not ready to go at that point, we can reevaluate this, upcoming winter, which I think it's still going on actually. So I've maybe, November, December. So there's no rush. Once the drawings are done, we can sit on them pretty much as long as we want until the time is right to put them on the street to try to time the market correctly. The construction market used to be really cyclical, and you would know the best time to bid is in November, right, or October. Right now, it's gone haywire. So I think the advantage of having the design done and having them sitting and waiting is we can try to time it as perfectly as possible sometime in the future to be determined at a later date.
Okay. Crystal, did that answer your question, or do you have some more? Are you okay? Yes. All right. Dan, sorry, go.
I like Colleen's idea. What I wasn't comfortable with was proceeding with construction. I just think Paul made a great point too about volatility. And I didn't want to kind of harp on this during the budget presentation, but right before this meeting, the chairman of school appropriations said schools should prepare for a $2,000 cut to an $800 on the low end. So if that's the case, those numbers would be really devastating. So, having that in my mind, I think we have to be really cautious spending money.
Liz.
Thank you. Well, thanks. Now I won't sleep tonight, Dan. But I agree. I was caught up about when to start the construction. I think that doing the planning right now is certainly not a bad idea. I'd like to have that in hand, so when the opportunity is ready, we can seize that opportunity. But I want to still stress that we need to be cautious. We need to watch what's happening. I like what Paul was saying. We don't have a lot of information. We need to see what's going to come out, what the changes are, what kind of environment we're dealing with. And then, the only thing we have is that leverage of when to start. And I don't want to lose that opportunity.
Okay, my friends. Does Mark go?
I'm all in favor of moving forward with the designs and the plans. My concern would be what we've seen in the past. We've already had a shutdown of construction for about 2 months. And they're talking about perhaps a second wave of COVID coming in the fall, maybe in the winter. My concern would be if we were to start a project and put shovels in the ground, and all of a sudden we get another emergency or executive order that puts a halt to all of our construction. Now we're in the middle of a project and we can't finish it. I think we have to be very careful as to when we start it and make sure that we are out of the woods on this, so that we're not caught with the project halfway done, and then they're telling us you have to stop your construction. So I think we have to play it by ear, see what happens as we go forward. But I'm all in favor of getting the designs done now, have them ready. And if we get a go-ahead and we evaluate it at a later point and we believe that perhaps we're beyond this, then we can go ahead and start the project.
That's a great point, Mark.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I have one
Okay.
every once in a while.
We'll give you a little star today. So, okay, are you guys good with that? So just sort of the gist of it is, we're all good with moving forward on the design project, and then we're on the wait and see for the shovel in the ground. Am I summarizing okay? And then Allison, we need to vote on the HED stuff on Monday.
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So we're all good with this, and then we're gonna move to E. We're gonna do okay. Contract with owner's rep for central office renovation. And Mrs. Oquist or Mrs. Smith?
I'll let
Which
Mrs.
one of
Smith
you?
get started, and then I'll make a couple comments.
Okay. Fantastic.
Thank you. So what was originally included in the board's packet, was a memo from me as well as a contract for Plant Moran Cressa to serve as our owner's rep for the central office renovation. kind of what we were discussing earlier with the sinking fund, we've had a great working relationship with Cressa. They're in our district for they were in our district for the 2013 bond that just ended in December. They're also here for the sinking fund. And it just became a natural thing for us to reach out to them when we were exploring renovation options for central office. And so we began, talking to them, and they've been giving us advice and a number of things, which I'll outline for you. But I want to share with the board, this was something that Cressa kind of did in good faith, because this isn't something, again, it's not part of our 2013 bond that we have them under contract to help us with, nor is it a sinking fund project that, again, they have a contract with us for. This was something above and beyond, separate from those things. This was a project coming out of our capital projects fund. So we wanted to acknowledge that Plant Moran Cressa has put a number of hours into this project on our behalf, but yet they haven't, we haven't paid them for those hours. So I wanted to share with you some of the things that they've been helping us with over the last 5 months related to this project. They solicited proposals from the 3 firms for programming services. They negotiated and finalized a consulting agreement with HED and Clark Hill. They facilitated the programming work, including building tours, surveys, and meetings. They presented findings to administration and to the board. They've solicited a proposal for design services with HED. They negotiated an agreement for the design services with HED and Clark Hill. And they also drafted an award recommendation for the board for these design services. And they also went back on our behalf. We had an agreement kind of tentatively in the works with HED. They went back to HED and negotiated some savings for us. So $20,000 price, cut from their original contract in light of the, the changes in the market. Cressa acknowledged that that might be something that we could go back to them and negotiate. So we've seen a reduction in their costs of $20,000 that Paul negotiated on our behalf. So what we had originally done, and what I talked through Paul with, was creating a contract like we've done in the past for this owner's representative, and it would cover the pre-project things that have already taken place, as well as the oversight of the construction project. But I do appreciate Paul's willingness to work with us, and perhaps what we would suggest to the board is, instead of establishing a contract for an owner's rep at this point, paying Plant Moran Cressa for the actual hours that they've worked on this project to date. And then when the time comes for us to move forward with construction, then moving ahead with an owner's rep agreement. And so I appreciate Paul's willingness to work with us on that. Again, we're trying to be good stewards and be cost effective on the way we move forward with this project, but we also don't want to take advantage of Plant Moran Cressa, and again, ask them to do their services for free. So what I would propose we do is move forward with Cressa submitting a bill to the district for their actual hours worked to date, and then we can go ahead and pay that. And then I know we'll have some additional hours billed, because there'll be some additional work as far as the design piece now goes. But that is what we wanted to cover with the board. So if we do go in that direction, this wouldn't necessarily be a voting item. This is something we could, again, it would be a normal thing for the district to pay for professional services of this nature. And then again, in the event that this project does move forward with construction, at that point, then we could bring forward a recommendation to the board for a contract for owner's rep, the kind of the oversight of the construction and whatnot. So I'll pause there and stop to see if Ms. Oquist or Paul wanted to join in and add anything to what I shared.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. So I hope that makes more sense overall by talking about the project as a whole, looking at the design piece, and then certainly our the support on this project from Plant Moran Cressa. And this seems to be based on the unknown as far as when we would move into the construction phase, a prudent way to proceed. Certainly the benefits that we've gained thus far by certainly Paul's involvement, but also Lisa Pitt's involvement, who has a strong background in architecture and design that's part of PMC, has worked really hand in glove with us throughout the initial work with HED. And I think we'll be able to wrap us up over these next few weeks to get that project done and ready to go when it is we are ready to go. It certainly acknowledges and compensates for the work that's been done, but allows us some flexibility in holding off before we move forward with the construction piece and holding on the contract until that time. And so we appreciate their willingness to look at that a little creatively and differently than we've done in the past. And certainly reflective of, the comments that all of you have shared about our partnership. And I would echo Phil's comments with regard to truly feeling like at the table, although, for instance, HED was one of the firms that they asked us to take a look at, interview, and recommend based on their experience with firms that did the type of work that need to be done at our office. It was Paul's suggestion that we go back and look to renegotiate for the remainder of the contract with HED, and have probably saved us close to what their fees will be, by that work. So just wanted to bring that to the board and have you be able to view the full picture of this important project.
Anybody? Crystal?
Thanks. Paul, did you have something that you wanted to, did you ever hand up? No. So a couple of things I just wanted to bring up. I think that in the interest of full transparency and where we are, our role as a board, I think that it's really important that we as a board approve things before it's done, because I think it's hard to go back after. And I know that we have a great relationship for Plant Moran, and you guys have done phenomenal things for us in cost savings, and the teamwork that you have with our staff is unbelievable. So I think that that's amazing, and I think that your value is unprecedented. But I do think in terms of oversight and community oversight is that we do need to know before it goes into the process of what we're paying for and what we're doing. And I just think that that's a really important piece. I think also when we go into this, I'm glad that we're not we're holding on the piece of the construction bid and award throughout the project closeout. So I think that that's a piece that we're going to wait on. And I think that Allison, that was a great way to kind of put a hold on this project. And so as we go forward, if we bring it back in the fall, it's just the more times we bring it back, the more times we're utilizing Paul's expertise, and we're utilizing Paul's ability to have his team come together and look at it. So I do think it's wise for us as a board to kind of say, when do we want to engage Paul's team to look at it next? And when do we want to kind of, in the fall, do we want him to bring the numbers back, or do we want to wait till January? But I think that that's a communication, Allison and Andre, that you guys can have in terms of the board's direction for that. And the other thing that I did want to bring, just talking about where we are financially, and the more we get into these finances and what it's going to look like, I know that we just approved we just talked about Plant Moran in our sinking fund. If we're not able to do those dollars, I know that there's a percentage. So if we're not able to do those dollars this summer because of all of the precautions, if you will, does that number change, Paul, that we are paying you for not doing that scope? Does that make sense? Or maybe that's an Allison question. I'm not sure who that goes to, but just if that number doesn't get down, or even if we have the funds, we're not able to do it in a summer, does that number go down, or is that a fixed number?
And typically the way we look at that is, even if the work is postponed for this summer, that work is going to get done. So that would mean potentially doubling up in, a future summer, or if it, whenever the construction takes place. So the volume of the work wouldn't go away. It would just be the timing of when the work takes place, if that makes sense. That's
but I remember. But I think last time we extended their contract for a year because we didn't get it all done that year. Do you know what I'm saying? We didn't do it that year, so we extended their contract for next year, as opposed to taking that money into the next year. Does that make sense?
Paul, yeah, let Paul
Yeah, I would just say, the sinking fund was maybe a little bit different than the bond. Obviously, the bond, there were certain decisions that led to that going a little bit longer. Part of it was the fact that we saved a lot of money along the way, and we had some extra dollars at the end to do some additional scope is part of what made the bond go for another year. The sinking fund, we really took what we thought was a reasonable assumption of about $4 million a year. As I mentioned before, that worked out to about 22 million. We actually ended up doing about 28 million, but we did it over the same period of time, and our hours were reasonably what we projected. So, we are very cognizant of the financial position that our K-12 and municipal clients are about to find themselves in. We want to always do what's right and be sensitive for our clients. If you need our help and we can provide value, we're happy to do it. If you guys want to do things on your own, and there's a lot of instances of that over the last 7 or 8 years where the district's just tackled something on their own, that's great too. We only want to be here helping if we can provide value and be part of the team and really help. So we're happy to discuss different arrangements and get creative with how we come in and out if that makes more sense. I have no issue with just helping for the design and then putting the construction piece on hold, and everything that you guys have talked about tonight, I think is all prudent. So we're happy to help where we can and where we're needed.
Crystal, you good?
I just didn't, I wasn't clear about the sinking fund. Paul, did you, so if we don't do that scope this year, or you can get back to me. If you don't know the answer, that's fine. You can give it.
No, I can answer that. So I would say probably about half of our effort is actually in the planning phase. If you think about it, especially for the sinking fund, it's probably actually more than that, because the summer construction season might only be 12 weeks long, but the other 40 weeks of the year, we're actually designing, we're bidding things out, we're writing contracts, we're making sure materials get delivered, we're making sure that things get ordered and that we're prepared for construction. And then the summer design and construction seasons kind of overlap. But if there were an instance where the district said, you know what, for the next year, we're going to put the sinking fund on hold and we're not going to do any projects for a year, we would certainly pause our fee and pause our contract and then wait to restart it for whenever the district was ready. So if at any time we got out of whack, we would absolutely reopen it up and have a new conversation. During the last sinking fund engagement, which was about 5 years long, we actually got off to a little bit of a slow start as far as putting construction dollars in place, because rather than doing roofs and parking lots, we took some of that money and applied it to Franklin High School and then to Stevenson High School to do some additional scope over there. But in that case, there was a lot of planning efforts, a lot of design, a lot of redesign that we were spending our time on. So absolutely, we are completely open and transparent with the level of effort we think we need to put in. And if at any time it's out of whack, we're happy to sit down with the district and readjust.
Okay. Anybody? Crystal, are you good now? You okay? Thumbs up somewhere in there. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So Allison, you're going to write that our plant's gonna give us that bill, and then you're just gonna take care of that.
I will. Yep.
Okay. And everybody, I know we keep getting off on these tangents, which is fun about these meetings, but everybody hang on a second, Karen. Everybody understands that was kind of the outcome we were to get to. Karen, go. Okay, go ahead,
Okay,
Karen.
so just so I understand, you're gonna get a bill from Paul, but we don't know how much it's gonna be for yet. You're gonna put in how many hours it was. I just want to make sure that's what we're gonna do. Is that what's?
Yeah, and my recommendation is that we finalize this last piece of the design phase and that we have that be all encompassing, so we're not doing this twice. So for the pre-design work that was already done, complete this work over the next few weeks or whatever it is for HED, and then close out that portion of it until we pick back up for the construction.
Okay, and then we'll have Paul will come back and we'll vote on whether or not we want Plant Moran Cressa to continue for the next project. Is that what we're doing?
Yes, but that won't be at the next meeting. That would be when we're ready to move forward with re-engaging for construction.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, you guys are all good? You get where we're going with this? Okay. So, oh, Mark gave us a thumbs up. Okay. So, that is, unless anybody has somebody else, anything else, that's it for this item. Okay. And does that mean Paul's gonna go or is he staying?
He gets to go.
Yep, it was great
Bye.
to see everyone healthy and doing all right. And hopefully we'll all be back at central office sometime soon.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging in there with us.
For
Stay
sure.
well, Paul.
Yep, you guys too.
All right, my friends, our last item on our finance journey is the update on the sale of property, and Allison's going to help us.
Thank you. This will be a relatively brief update. We've talked about this a number of times throughout this school year. As you know, back in October 2018, we had some initial conversations about our vacant properties and would it make sense to sell any of them. So we since engaged Great Northern Consulting Group, real estate experts, and they went out and valued some of the properties. And we decided this past fall to put out a request for proposal for 3 of our properties: Adams, Old Webster, and Wilson. And so we did interviews with the developers in January, had some final and best offers placed in February. And now we're at the point where our attorney is working with the highest bidders for each of those properties to develop a purchase agreement. So our hope is to have that for you on Monday. Then we can share obviously additional information with the community about those happenings, but that is our hope, that this would be ready to go for your vote on Monday, the 18th. If for some reason that it is not ready for the 18th, then again, our goal would be to bring this to you the following month in June. So just wanted to keep you updated on where we are with that process.
Sounds good.
Okay, do you guys have Crystal?
So
Fire
sorry,
away.
but I didn't get to Alice. All this can be done electronically, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Nope.
All right. So that President Johnson will conclude finance.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield.
Yes.
This will then take us to item 4, building and site. I must have the wrong agenda because I only have one item. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Centers.
That's right. Victory is mine. Victory is mine. So one item, purchase of furniture for Nijiero Elementary School, 2013 bond. Mr. Francis.
It's one item, but I'm going to talk for a very long time just to make up for it. So we have what is entirely a bond purchase for Nijiero furniture. However, in the memo I had written, Andrea, and that she included in your packet, you can see the breakdown of what's occurring. We're just basically trying to save on timing, et cetera. We just put all of them together into one because it's all from school specialty. So as just a breakdown, Nijiero has, just like the other elementary schools, a amount of the bond dollars for building-based projects, as well as a pot to update their staff lounge. So just like you've seen in some other schools, as recently as last month, where I talked about both Frost and Stevenson, Niji has a purchase from their building-based bond projects in the amount of $20,142.86. And that's going to be a variety of items throughout the building. mostly, and you can see a lot of tables. Actually, that's another section. The building base is quite a bit in their office, and that was actually an item that we had discussed with building, saying if your main office was renovated but your secretary still has an old desk, you can replace that, things like that. So those of you who've seen Nijiro's renovated main office, it's a beautiful main office with still though the traditional desk in the principal's office and the secretary's section area. We have the built-ins up front though, and those are gorgeous. So we're going to try to update office furniture in that way. There's a second section, the staff lounge, which you might be familiar with, which is $9,762.96, and that is for some tables and chairs in their staff lounge for the instructional staff. And then all of the, and I just have to go backwards to just to lay it out for you. All of the elementary schools and secondary schools over the past couple of years had flexible furniture money allocated to the buildings. All of the elementary schools had a base amount plus an additional based upon a per pupil amount. So for every student, there is additional money. And we've gone through that process with the board, making those purchases and getting those items in. During that time, it had not yet been decided by the board to renovate Nijiro. So to keep that slate clean at that time, elementary director did not do an allocation to Nijiro for flexible furniture out of bond, because again, at that time, we were still not doing any bond work at Nijiro. Once Nijiro, the board decided to renovate Niji, now that we had that completed, the elementary director, Mrs. Scott, did the allocation for Nijiro to have their flexible furniture, much like every other elementary school. So they suddenly had another item that the other elementaries and secondaries had done previously, and that sort of had a bow put on it, but they still had theirs to do. They've turned out that their $27,749.45 of their classroom flexible furniture that's going to be scattered throughout the building in all classrooms also is going to come from school specialty. So Mr. DeLuca, the principal there, and his team, when they went through looking at all this, they while they kept them in their silos with the budgetary dollars as they were allocated, they did just go through the same vendor, which made it quite easy. We can do a single PO, break up the budget codes on it, and have it all done at one time. So the total of this purchase is $57,655.27. But again, that's coming from 3 separate items. And instead of playing around with, oh, that's only 9,700, or oh, that's only 20,000, we just put it all together and brought it to the board, as opposed to breaking them apart.
Great. Questions? Mrs. Brennan? Nope. Okay. If I miss anyone, just speak up.
Yep. And it is from the memo, I did make note that the Association of Educational Purchasing Agency, the AEPA, is the cooperative furniture bid that satisfies the board's requirement to go out for bid.
Great. I just want to say that overall these have gone really well, and looking forward to seeing the furniture in Nijiro too. Mrs. Bradford.
Yes, thank you. I agree. I'm glad to see that Nijiro was able to garner some extra, or what was pretty much, we're bringing them up to par with everybody else. Well deserved for them. And I have to say, there were some interesting pieces of furniture that I saw in there.
The flexible furniture in the classrooms was cute.
Yes, one of them was like this nest thing I was looking at, and I thought that was really great, and looking forward to getting over there to see how it looks once it all comes in. Do we think that would be coming in the fall then?
We currently, just recently had, and I've discussed with just elementary principals this morning and a few others, that if you have orders, get them in, because we're putting them on. The big pause during the shutdown was mostly because we didn't know how we would receive orders, even if a company was getting it from the manufacturer, and even if they were going to deliver, we weren't sure how we would be able to accept. but that's starting to our warehouse folks are there part-time a couple of days. So we decided let's start getting them in. So our intention would be to have these in. I mean, my hope is that potentially even in this current fiscal year, meaning by June 30th. Usually furniture can be 5 to 8 weeks out, but regardless, I have as long as there's not a manufacturer hang up of some sort, Miss Bradford, I would say for sure we would have them for the fall.
I think that's great. I think it's really something wonderful for them to look forward to coming back to school.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And I liked I do like how they had the little pictures in the quote. So you can sort of
the
get
pictures are
a
great.
flavor for what's going on there.
The colors, I mean, I don't know if they'll be those exact same colors, but the furniture I thought looked really fun.
Yeah, a lot of them say color to be determined on the quote, but you know if it's Nigiero, it's going to be colorful because that's their thing.
That's their thing. Thanks.
Very cool. Okay, anything else?
Just requesting for this to go on next week's voting meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Johnson, that concludes building and site.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. That'll take us to item 5, our Personnel Committee, and Mrs. Frank.
Thank you so much. Mr. Archibald is going to lead us through this discussion, correct?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Frank. I just needed to find which one of the 3 commands needed to unmute. No, I think I found it. If we're ready, I'll go. These are all informational items, administrative vacancy related. The first one is just an update on the Roosevelt principal vacancy, which was created with Mr. Green's move over to central office. The posting went out on April 30th. It actually closed today at 4 o'clock. We have a very large number of applicants for that, which is very exciting. We did provide, if you recall, when we have vacancies, Mrs. Oquist and I and the director will go out to the buildings and we'll ask questions. And given the current situation, we chose to do this via Google Doc. And so we sent out a Google Doc to the Roosevelt staff asking for their input on the characteristics of the next principal, what the Roosevelt staff values about the school, what the Roosevelt staff feels the community values about the school. We left it open to say any other comments that you want us to consider. And we actually provided both our email and cell phone numbers for Mrs. Oquist and me, and really trying to provide opportunities for folks to provide feedback in whatever means they felt most comfortable. We will compile that information. We use that information to provide a candidate profile for the next principal. We share it with the interview team as they craft questions for the interview. And ultimately, once someone's selected, we'll share a summary of that feedback actually back with that individual before they start their position. So that we'll work on this week. The screening for this position will actually screen the applicants based on the number of applicants. This may take quite a while, but the process will start this coming Wednesday with interviews to start next week. So that is Roosevelt. Mrs. Oquist, anything you want to add to that?
No, we're thrilled with the response and the interest, and have a very deep pool of applicants. So we're appreciative of that, and excited for that process, that screening and interview process to begin. And we certainly want to give a thanks and a shout out to the Roosevelt staff who really provided some very thoughtful feedback in their responses, and very detailed feedback, which will certainly be proved to be helpful as we create our profile of a leader through the screening and interview process.
Thank you. The next one is the Livonia Career Technical Center principal. As you know, we announced last week that Mr. Harper will be moving over there. He's currently, as you know, but anyone tuning in, both of them, I will communicate. He is currently the principal at Stevenson. A little bit of background, and the board all knows this because we touched base with you last week, but again, just for the general public to know, prior to beginning his career in education, Mr. Harper worked in the business sector for 9 years. He's currently the principal at Stevenson. He's been with LPS for 20 years
Didn't work.
as a business teacher, as an assistant principal, and currently as a principal. And actually, with this assignment, he will have hit for the cycle, and that he will have worked in each of our secondary high schools. Mr. Harper holds his certification in vocational education, as well as an education specialist degree in educational leadership, a master's of art in teaching, and a BSBA in business administration. Currently serves on the district school improvement team and is a member of the LPS quality assurance review team. In his prior business-oriented world, he was the business department chairperson for Churchill High School. He was a co-op coordinator, a DECA sponsor, and Livonia Global Business Seminar coordinator. Mr. Harper is extremely excited for the opportunity. He has loved his role in Livonia and really looked to serve each of the communities he's worked in. Very passionate about that. Very difficult decision for him to leave Stevenson, and that he loves that community and the work he's doing there, but is extremely excited for the opportunity to return back to more his CTE roots and where he started his career with Livonia. He is looking at the profile and the information we heard from that staff in terms of Mr. Harper's background, his demeanor, his style. I really trust that this will be a very good fit for the Career Center. So again, he has already started communicating with Mr. Anderson and intends to join the staff meeting there this week and begin that transition to the Career Center. And then lastly, with Mr. Harper moving over there, it creates a vacancy at Stevenson. That posting went out today. It will close Friday, May 22nd. Similarly to what we talked about in getting staff feedback from the Roosevelt staff, we have already put a similar document out to the Stevenson staff. That will close here towards the end of this week. And we look to begin screening and interviews the week of May 25th. Our long-term target would be to bring a recommendation to you to the board at the June, I believe it is the June 15th meeting. But again, that's a tentative timeline, and we'll set that. We won't rush any decisions. As you know, we look to make the best decisions, not necessarily speedy or fast decisions. But those are the 3 administrative vacancies that we're working on currently. So any questions or any additional comments?
Does anyone have any questions? Sorry, I was talking over you, Mr. Archibald. I forgot to go on mute.
Okay.
Anything else? I think it's very exciting when we see people using their gifts and growing as leaders and being able to move and use their gifts the way that they desire and the way that makes them feel the most productive. And so I think it's really exciting to see the changes that we're doing in the district. So thanks so much on behalf of all the teams that are doing all the interviews and placing people where they want to be. So thank you. If that's it.
No,
that
you're
wraps
really
up.
welcome. Now, we're wrapped up.
Thank you.
Did you have something else, Steve?
The only thing I would have added, Mr. Johnson, was just to thank all the directors are involved when we have these vacancies. It may be, Keith or I that are shepherding the process, but all of our cabinet members are involved in one level of interviewing or another, or screening, as well as many of our other staff. So it's a very exciting process, one we take a great deal of pride in and work very hard to get right. So lots of good things going on.
Absolutely. That's very exciting. And that finishes up personnel, President Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. That'll take us to item 6, our curriculum committee, and Mrs. Jarvis.
No report at this time, President Johnson. Mrs. Oquist, is there anything you need to add?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
She's so polite about it. That'll take us to item 7, our policy committee, and Mrs. Burton.
There's no report for policy either tonight. we're plenty busy with everything else going on right now.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. That'll take us to item 8, our Legislative Committee, and Mrs. Bradford.
Thank you, President Johnson. I do not have a report tonight. Do you have anything, Mrs. Oquist?
No, I'll just tell you,
No.
certainly we're watching what's happening at the state on a daily basis, really in twofold. One on the budget, which we talked about
Yes.
this evening. I think we'll get some information Friday. I don't think we'll get everything that we'll need to know, but I think it'll certainly give us our first blush at that. And then certainly the second piece is taking a close look at when the stay home, stay safe order is lifted, what guidelines will still be in place with regard to gatherings, the number of students and things like that, because that impacts many decisions going forward from our summer programming and summer camps all the way through to the beginning of the year. So we follow that on a daily basis, the executive orders coming out of the state, including the update we got last week on the evaluation process, which has a pretty tight and quick timeline. But Mr. McDonald took our administrators through that, I think within about a 48-hour period. And so we are certainly adjusting to those directives as they come out and watching them closely. But certainly, please feel confident that we are on top of it and always reading through those in great detail as they come out to us.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. There is always a lot of legislative things happening, as Dan Centers knows so well. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. That brings us to the
Mr. Francis has
Just,
questions.
President Johnson, just before you end, I just wanted to say, I think I misspoke about office desks at Nigiero. It was more like conference tables and chairs. So I apologize for any confusion. And I'm not sure who's getting an office desk at this point, but it was more of their office conference room that they have, and some of the monies that they're putting that towards that. So sorry for any confusion.
The meeting shall begin shortly.
Virtual meetings are okay.
All right, thank you all for hanging in there. I know this is not the same as all being there in person. We'd love to see everyone, but we're getting through it as best we can. Virtual meetings are just like that, they're virtual. But thank you again for hanging in. We're at the end of the agenda, and we will all be back next Monday for our regular meeting. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.